Hey everybody, sorry about the start and then the cutoff with the last link. So if you're signing on again, or if you're seeing that we're live again, this is going to be the event link right now. And so I guess first I'm just going to kind of give a couple, put a couple things out there before I start. We will be starting the residue program next month in September. It'll be like the second or third Tuesday, and so it'll be 6 p.m. I'll give an exact date tomorrow, and so we're just going to go ahead and start. All right. I'm sure everyone can hear me. Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to start with my testimony, and then we're going to bring the next speaker up. I had a video, but I can't share it because things just aren't working, of course, the way they should. So my father, he took his life just before I was born. So I longed for male affirmation, male validation. And sadly, that put a target on my back as a young boy. And I was abused by several safe adults. 2 teachers, the friend of a father of a friend, neighbor, family friend, a family member. So that kind of put me in a dark, dark place where I started to dissociate from self, from all the trauma. To me, sex was love. That's what I believed. And so for me, I was 10 years old, cutting school and hanging out in bus stops and public bathrooms and just waiting for somebody to come along and show me some love. And sadly, they always showed up. The second teacher that abused me, he actually was a part-time guidance counselor. And he used to tell me that I was a good little girl and daddy's little girl. And so when I started to dissociate, that's how I just wanted to become a girl, because the more feminine I acted, the more attention I received. And anyone with children knows that doesn't matter what kind of attention it is attention to a child, whether it's positive or negative. And so for me, it was almost all negative. Without a father, in a house of women, grew up in a house of women. I had 2 older brothers, but they were never present. But and so that kind of went on for years for me, sneaking out of the house, cutting school, doing things, hanging out with people I shouldn't have been with, staying out all night, and then sneaking back in. And my mom had no clue all of this was going on. And when I was 13, I overdosed on pills, and I didn't care if I lived or died. And I kind of welcomed death. And my mom was at her wit's end and thought, I have to get him out of here. So she took me from South Jersey to Philadelphia to a family friends. And for me, that was out of the frying pan into the fire, because Philadelphia was like that same community, just way bigger. And so my mom said to me, and we weren't Christians at the time, but just from her nature as a mother, she looked at me and said, I had a son. I didn't have a daughter. You're David. You can't be all these names that you keep making up for yourself. I can't find makeup in your school bag. I can't find girls' clothes hidden in your room. She's like, you can't do that under this roof. So I ran away. And so at 13, I lived on the streets of Philadelphia, and all I knew was engaging in sexual activity. That was love to me. And so I was embraced by the LGBTQ movement. I was embraced by that community. And the older trans identified individuals would give me pointers on how to survive. So now it's sex for money, just prostitute yourself. It's the best way. It's the only way. It's what all of them did. And so I started wrong sex hormones at 14. I lived on the streets of Philadelphia. I was a prostitute. I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. And I was HIV positive at age 14. And back then, it's when it really first came out. And everybody was dying all around me. One of my friends would be like, hey, I'm HIV positive. And 3 weeks later, he'd be gone. And it was a scary time. And I went to my peers and I was like, what do I do? I'm HIV positive. And they said, so what? So are we. The blankety blank that gave it to you didn't care. So don't you care who you give it to? And I was an angry 14-year-old child with a mental disorder and a whole lot of underlying issues and a whole lot of comorbidities and a whole lot of trauma. And so transgenderism and homosexuality and all of the other things that I did, they were all trauma responses. They were my trauma responses. So my teenage years, pretty much a blur. My 20s, pretty much a blur. In and out of juvenile detention, in and out of county jail as an adult, in and out of prison, state prison as an adult. And my last time in prison, I was transgender. I was trans identified for 20 years of the 30 plus years that I spent wrapped up in that movement. And I looked like that. And I was in a men's prison. And I was actually, because it's about being like the center of attention sometimes. And you just want to be seen and acknowledged. You want the attention. And so I was on the rec yard and I was cheerleading for the guys playing basketball. And a correctional officer kept looking at me and he says, come here. He says, what's your name? I said, Paige. He said, no, that's a girl's name. He said, what's the name your mama gave you? I said, David. And he said, well, David, do you know that God didn't create you to be that way? And I was like offended, angry. How dare he speak to me like that? And I looked at him and I said, of course he did. Look at me. I do this well. And he says, no. And I said something about it being natural. And he says, if it's so natural, how many pills did you have to take to look like that? How many procedures, how many things did you have to do to look like that? And, and that really struck a chord with me because I didn't have a response for that. How could it be natural when I had to do all of these things to look like that? And when I was 14 on the streets, I met two post-operative transgenders. They had both had the surgery and I idolized them. To me, they were like, I wanted to be them. They were beautiful. They had money. They had it all. They always looked happy and joyful. I wanted to be them so bad. And so in my early 20s, I went to New York City, which is where they live, to get castrated. And that was the first step back then to the sexual reassignment surgery. And we were sitting on a beach on Coney Island, sitting on a blanket, and we were talking. And one of them just looked at me and he said, don't do it. And he said, all my life, I felt like if I could just become a woman, that I would find peace and joy and happiness. He said, and now I'm legally a woman. He said, and guess what? I'm more miserable today than I've ever been my entire life. And he says, I think about ending my life every single day. And the other one looked at me and said, you don't want to be us. He said, every day I get on the subway several times. He said, every time that train comes down the track, I think about stepping off the platform in front of it. He said, don't do it. And I remember going back to my hotel and just like bawling up and crying my eyes out and bawling and thinking to myself, like, if this isn't going to bring me what I'm like, peace and joy and everything that I'm looking for and seeking, then what's my next step? And I continued to be trans identified, but I didn't have any surgeries or any procedures done. I didn't do it. I just couldn't, not after what they had said to me. So here I am in prison, and this correctional officer is like, I'm going to tell you this every single day. And I'm like, okay. And he did every day. He would see me on the rec yard or see me walking, and he'd say, hey, David, God didn't create you to be that way. And and then finally it got to the point where he'd say, hey, David. And I'd say, God didn't create me to be this way. And then I'd walk away angry that I said those words. But one thing that he didn't do was he never came to me with a Bible and tried to beat me in the head with scripture. He never did that. He understood that the scripture says that the natural man receives not things of the spirit, that that is foolishness unto him. That these are spiritually discerned things. So what he did was he tried to feed the natural man naturally with what I longed for the most, which was really just an intimate bond, a connection, a relationship. And he was the first man. I was 30 something years old when he witnessed to me. And he was the first man my entire life that I was ever sure truly loved me and just didn't want anything from me, didn't want to use me, abuse me, kick me while I was down, profit off me. He just wanted to pour into me ever so freely what was poured into him ever so freely. And it really, he really touched me. And he came to me one day. So my mom sent me a Bible while I was in prison, and not because she became a Christian, but when your kid's in prison, you send them a Bible. And actually it was because she saw on the 700 Club popped on after The Price is Right or something. And she saw this, the first thing they said was, do you know anybody in prison incarcerated? We'll send them this Bible for free. So she was like, yeah, I'm gonna sign my son up. So I get this Bible and I'm like, what do I do with this? And so I go to not Bishop, which is what we call this correctional officer. We called him Bishop. He witnessed to everybody the same way, other officers and inmates. He treated nobody differently. And I went to the guy on the block that worked at the chapel, and we called him Choir Boy. And I was like, Choir Boy, what do I do with this? And then where do I start? And he was like, read Psalms. It's inspirational. And I remember going back to my bunk and laying there, and I'm looking through it. And this was me, and he comes up, he goes, what's the matter? I said, I can't find no Psalm. There's no Psalms in here. And he said, it starts with a P. I said, oh. And then I found Psalms. And I started reading Psalms, and I was like, crush them, bring them to their knees, destroy them, oh Lord, please. I'm like, that's not inspirational. And I threw that Bible in my footlocker, and I never touched it again my entire time I was incarcerated. But Bishop came to me one day and he says, David, I've read your entire file. He says, and I can't believe that you're alive. He says, I can't believe that you have survived all that you've survived. And I can't believe that you have been through, that you have been through everything that you've been through. He says, when you get saved, he didn't say if, he said, when you get saved, your testimony is going to be able to reach so many people on so many different levels because you can relate to all of them. And I was like, yeah, okay. And he said, I'm going to tell you a story. He said, because I know you sincerely believe that you're same-sex attracted. He says, but let me tell you a story about another man that was sincere. He said, his name was Saul. He said, and he sincerely loved the Lord. He sincerely thought he was doing the Lord's work. He said, but he was jailing Christians and dragging them through the streets. He was present for their deaths. He was hell on wheels, David. And I was like, yeah. And I'm thinking, that don't sound like he's really working for the Lord to me. And he says, and one day he was on his way to Damascus, and guess who showed up? And I said, who? He said, Jesus. He says, then guess what Jesus did? And I'm like, what? And he's like, he knocked him off his high horse. He blinded him so he could see. And then he went from being sincerely wrong to being sincerely right. And he went from being Saul to Paul, and he wrote most of the New Testament. And I just remember thinking, wow, okay, that's cool. And these are the things that he did to introduce me to the scripture. He told me stories about the scripture. and things that I could relate to, things that pertain to me. And I remember before I got out of prison, I was sitting on this rock on the rec yard, and a homosexual had come up to me and he was like, "What's wrong with you? You're getting ready to get released. You look so sad." I said, I'm literally sitting here thinking that I've been with thousands upon thousands. I said, maybe tens of thousands of men in my life. I says, and I've basically destroyed my life. I said, but there's one man that I never gave a chance. And he said, who? And I said, Jesus. And he's like, oh, you're just getting crazy because you're getting ready to go home. And he walked away. And I just remember thinking about that. And so I got out of prison and I didn't become a Christian. Like a dog, I returned to my vomit. But the one thing that was different when I got out of prison was I no longer wanted to be Paige. Like I no longer wanted to dress like a woman. And then I had this issue because now I looked like a woman and I had breasts and I was like, what am I going to do? I don't want to be a woman anymore. And I just remember learning so many more lessons after that. And I had suffered from the wrong sex hormones. I started wrong sex hormones at 14. And by the age of 20, I was sterile. By the age of 25, I had osteopenia. By the age of 30, I had osteoporosis. I had thyroid issues and heart disease. And they're all directly related to the wrong sex hormones. And the osteoarthritis is something that I live with, but it's my recompense. It's my reward for the choices that I made in life. And he's done amazing things in my life. He's healed me from so many things. So I have no complaints. And so by 2008, I had osteoporosis so bad I couldn't stand up straight, couldn't walk without a walker. They put me on Oxycontin, oxycodone. They made me a legal drug addict now. And I'm dragging myself around. I'm in excruciating pain. But it still didn't stop me from going to the club and to the casino and to sell drugs and to buy drugs and to go to these sex parties and all of this stuff. It still didn't stop me. The lust of my flesh was stronger than my excruciating pain. And then in 2009, he struck me down with full-blown AIDS. And I say he struck me down, and a lot of people think, oh, yeah, because that's God's punishment. It's not God's punishment. Again, it was my recompense. It was my reward for all the choices that I made in my life. I made the choices to do what I did. And I'm glad that I was stricken down, because who knows what would have happened to me if I wasn't. But my immune system went from, I had my T cells, that's how they measure your immune system. My T cells were in thousands, and then they went to 11, and then they were 0. My viral load went from in the hundreds and then the thousands into the hundreds of thousands and to the million per part. That's an extremely high viral load. The virus took over my body. I had infections in my brain, infections in my blood. I had boils popping out all over my body, fighting their way, the infection fighting its way out of me. And the doctor said, you have 3 months, probably. He put hospice in place. He put a hospital bed in my home. And that was that. And then I remember when I came home from prison, I had brought that Bible home and I put it on my nightstand, because your nightstand looks better with a Bible on it. And I used it as a coaster. And I remember sitting in that hospital bed with hospice coming in. And I remember thinking, I'm afraid to die. And me, I'm an I want to know why kind of guy. Like all my life, I was like, I don't fear death. I fear nothing. And I wanted to know why I was so afraid to die. And then it just hit me. I was afraid to die because I didn't want to go to hell. And I knew that hell was what I deserved, and hell was where I was on my way to. I knew it. There was no doubt in my mind. And I picked up that Bible and I opened it up and I went like this. And the first verse I ever read in the New Testament was Romans 1:27. It said, men burning in lust for one another, giving up the natural function of the woman. I slammed it shut once again. And I was like, really? And but it intrigued me and it moved me. And it kind of destroyed my whole foundation that I had my entire life. And so I opened it and read it from cover to cover. And I just remember repenting and giving it to him. Like, the word was very precise, very detailed to me. And I knew that my repentance, I had to be just as precise and just as detailed to him. And I knew somehow it was like I was an app and God was downloading things into me, but he let me know that I had a father that loved me unconditionally. And I had never known that. I had never known a father. You know, all of my life, I thought my father was a coward. I thought all kinds of ill will towards my father because he took his life. He left me. He abandoned me. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm going to hell. I don't want to go to hell. And I just started diving into the word and just absorbing all that I could and releasing. Every time I spoke something, it was like I was releasing the power that it held over me. I could feel the pressure release. And when I read Job, and I read about how he was stricken down with his boils, and I read the passage that said that he took broken pottery and scraped his boils, I knew why he was doing it, because I had boils like that. And I used to throw myself down on the bed real hard to make them bust, because the pressure release, the pressure is where the pain came from. And I just wanted the relief, and I used to make them bust. So when I read that, I was like, in my head, I'm thinking like, gosh, I got Job boils. What's going to happen to this man? So I need to know. And I just kept reading and reading, and everything that I read, like, you know, Jesus said that I was going to be a fisher of men. And I'm like, I want to know why, guy. How am I going to do it? If I go fishing, I need bait. What am I fishing for? What am I doing? And then I get to Revelation 12:11, and it says, they, meaning the church, overcame him, meaning the enemy, by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their testimony. And they loved not their lives when faced with death. And I was like, that's it. Like, the light bulb went off. I said, this is it. This is how we do it. My testimony is my bait. I catch him, he cleans them. It's that simple. How do I catch him? With my testimony. How does he clean them? With the blood. That's how simple it is. Because I couldn't figure out, like, why do we have all this Baptist, this and this Pentecostal, and then this is this, and all of these different denominations. I'm like, and it's so simple. Like, the gospel and the word is so simple. It's so easy. All we have to do is establish intimate relationships with people who need them the most. All we have to do is pour into them ever so freely what has been poured into us ever so freely. All we have to do is catch them and then let him do what he does, clean them. And that's up to him. That's however he does it. And I remember waking up one morning, and it's my moment of grace, I call it, because I was in excruciating pain, and I'm thinking, hey, I feel peace. Like, I have peace. I was like, I've never known this before. I've never experienced peace. And I remember thinking, or just knowing, like, I'm not going to hell. I've been forgiven. My Father in heaven has forgiven me. I'm not going to hell. I have surrendered. I have repented. And I remember thinking, I'm ready. And I spoke it out loud. I said, I'm ready. Take me home, please. I don't want to be here. I don't want to look like this. I don't want to feel like this. Just please get me out of here. I said, but I have one request, that someone would come to know you through my death. And selfishly, I was thinking of my mom. I was like, maybe she's going to come to know him when I die. And because my niece had came to visit me, And she said, I love you, Uncle David. And I said, you love me to death? And she said, yes, I love you to death. I said, that's the problem. Everybody has loved me to death all my life with their silence or their encouragement or their participation in my sin. I said, no one ever loved me to life with the truth. I said, because the truth is offensive, but we don't want to offend people. We don't want to hurt nobody's feelings. But the truth is offensive to those who don't live in the truth. So if we truly love, which is an action, right, then we're going to love somebody enough to offend them and tell them the truth. And I'm telling them I'm ready to go. And I started getting up out of bed that day. And I'm reaching for the cane one day, and I don't need the cane, and I'm standing up straight, and I'm blown away. And I walk out to the kitchen, and I start making some toast. And then I turn around and look over my shoulder, and there's my mom and my sister and my nephew or my niece, and they're all like looking at me like, what's he doing out of bed? And this is his last burst of energy. He's got to be out of here any minute. And they were wrong. And then I went in to see my doctor, and the doctor wouldn't come in the office. The nurse practitioner was in there, and she was a Christian. She used to ask me over that time when I was getting really sick, she would say, do you want to pray? And I say, what do I want to pray to your God for? What do I want to pray for? Look at me. And she was a stage 4 cancer survivor. And so I go in to see her, and I sit down, and she's like, David, Dr. Z is not coming in here because he doesn't have a scientific explanation for what's happening to you. And I'm like, what's happening to me? And she was like, your viral load is undetectable. She was like, and it's not like we've never seen a viral load go undetectable. She said, we've never seen a viral load go undetectable so quickly. She was like, your T cells are back up in the thousands. She was like, your immune system is growing and your viral load is dissipating. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that. Like, I'll take whatever you have for me. And then it hit me, and I looked at her, and I was like, actually, I would take stage 4 cancer right now. I said, if you need a limb, you can take a limb. You need an organ, I'll give an organ. I said, because I'm not what I was. I said, and I may not be who I'm going to be, but I'm not what I was. I said, so I'm ready any minute now. And then I looked at her, and I said, do you want to pray? And she was like, absolutely. And we prayed. And even hospice came out, and they says, well, David, if you're not dying, we can't come back. I'm like, peace, see ya. You know, but everything from 2009 to today, I owe everything to him. Everything. I walked away from the fold for a short period. I did ministry for like 11 years, and then I was just like traveling, and it was like ministries were like putting me on a pedestal, and they were like, oh, he's the guy, you got to talk to this guy, he's got it all together, he's solid. And that gets to your head, and you're traveling, and you're going from hotel to hotel, and then you're getting into little conflicts, and you're getting a little bitter here and there, and then you have a fallout with a church member, and you're like, and finally I was like, you know what? I started struggling with things. And when I started struggling with things, then I fell. I fell with somebody I was discipling. And from that point, I was like, I guess I'm done. And then I was like, guess what, everybody? I'm going to be a gay Christian. And God let me walk away from the fold because I had some lessons to learn. The main lesson I learned in that time was it is literally impossible to claim that false identity of a homosexual and be in a right relationship with him. Literally impossible. And he let me know that. And there were a lot of people that I connected with in that time period when I had walked away from the church. And I can say this, some of them clung to me even more when I renounced homosexuality as well. They clung to me even more because there was hope for them too. One was a trans-identified man, and when I met him, he was invited to lunch with me and a couple friends, and he says, my name is Gloria. I said, well, I'm not going to call you that. I said, but how about I call you G? He said, okay, I'll take that. And so we sat there at lunch. It was me and G, trans-identified, and two men that were claimed the false identity of homosexual. And we all sat there. We were getting ready to go see The Sound of Freedom. And we talked about our testimonies growing up. All four of us had almost the same identical testimony. All four of us had either no father or a bad father. All four of us were abused in some way, shape, or form. We were all abused sexually and physically. And then all of us had went into drugs and into alcohol and hit the streets and were promiscuous and all of those things. Two of us, me and G, had ended up going trans, and the other two didn't, but they were still in the same boat we were in. And G used to say, would you go hiking with me? Nobody wants to go hiking with me. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's go. So we used to go hiking. And then one day he's like, will you go shopping with me? Clothes shopping. And I said, no, immediately. And he looked at me and he's like, why not? And I said, I haven't bought pumps in a long time and I'm not going to start buying them now. And he's like, no, I want to buy men's clothes. I said, well, yeah, why are we going to wait for tomorrow? Let's go right now. And we went to Kohl's, and he was getting clothes, and he went in and he came out of the dressing room and he walked up to me and said, my name is Grayson. Nice to meet you. And I shook his hand and I said, nice to meet you, Grayson. Go try on your next outfit. And he's in Massachusetts now. And he got married probably about 6 months ago now to a detransitioner who was a young woman, and she transitioned into trying to be male because of her own trauma. And she detransitioned, and now they're a couple, and they're married, and they're working in a recovery home as a couple, and they're helping other people get recovered. Because once you surrender to Jesus, you're not in recovery, you've been recovered. And so all of that, hi, I'm David and I'm an addict, that's all nonsense. Once you surrender to Jesus, you are no longer an addict. You are an ex-addict. You're saved, you're redeemed, you're washed clean. And so God reeled me back in from all of that. And he's given me so much. I was trying to get out of Maine for years. And every time I try to get out of Maine, there's a roadblock. Every time I leave Maine, I end up coming back to Maine. There's something here. I'm supposed to be here. And look around you. It's a dark, dark place right now. And the darkness is trying to overcome, but we all know that the light penetrates the dark. Then we're supposed to be the salt and the light. And when I think about when he said we're the salt and the light, I think about what salt does, right? It pours some salt on an open wound, and I'm sure Dr. Rosario will tell you that it can clean the wound, but it's going to burn. And the truth burns sometimes. But that salt also can make people thirsty, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to make people thirst for the living water. And that's all we're supposed to be doing. We don't have to go out there with Bibles and bullhorns and try to beat people in the head with scripture, because natural man receives not things of the spirit. It's foolishness unto him. We have to remember that. And so these people need relationships. They need bonds. And that's the only way you can teach somebody something, is if you have a relationship with them. And so I have, so tomorrow we're going to have probably about 3 or 4 different presentations throughout the morning into the early afternoon from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And the presentations will be like what it means for us living in a gender affirming care sanctuary state, what that really means. Because there's a lot of things that a lot of people have no idea what that means and what they're actually doing and who they're doing it to. We'll also cover witnessing to those that are saturated and enveloped in that movement. We'll also cover prayer, and we will do a Q&A to address any questions or concerns. And so I'm going to end because I really, really, really am super excited. First, before I end, I want to tell a very quick story. You know, we all have those moments when we know that we are exactly where we're supposed to be. Like, God gives us this little moment, let us know we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And so when I moved to Maine in 2010, because I got saved and I was like, I got to get out of Jersey, because I started receiving all kinds of death threats from my loving, inclusive community. They wanted to firebomb my house and they wanted to end my life and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so we moved to Maine. And the medications that they had me on for so long, I had gained a lot of weight. I went up to like 450 pounds. And then I started needing, then the arthritis got worse and I started needing a walker again. And I went to some doctors and they all were like, well, you got to have this surgery. You got to have your spine surgery and you got to have this. And so I go into a doctor's office and I sit there and I look in his eyes and I see a caring man. And he looks at me and he says, I had a cross on my neck, on a chain. And he says, you're a believer? I said, yeah, absolutely. And he says, can I pray for you? That meant more to me than anything, because he looked at me and he said, you don't need this surgery. So what you need to do is work on losing weight. Because I was getting very depressed. Like, I was like, look at me. I'm huge. Can't do anything. All I want to do is eat, drink coffee, and sleep. That's it. And he prayed for me. And he told me, you don't need the surgery. And so that motivated me to lose weight. So I lost 256 pounds at that time. And I was 196 pounds. And I was in that building one day. I was like, you know what? I'm going to see him. He probably ain't going to remember me. It's been a couple years. And I go up and I had on my necklace, and I still had my cross on it, but I had added a wedding band to it. And when people asked me if I was married, I was like, yep, to Jesus. And so I go in his office and I said to his secretary, you know, I said, I was here years ago, and I gave her a little rundown. And I said, I don't know, he's probably busy, you know, whatever. But, and she kept looking at my necklace with the cross and the wedding band on it. And she was like, I think he'll see you. Hold on. She went back and she came out. You can come back. And I went to his office, and he remembered me. And at the time, his wife had just passed away. And he had on a necklace. And he pulled it out of his shirt, and it had a cross and a wedding band on it. And then many years went by, probably 10 years. And I went with Pastor Terry to a prayer event at Cross Point. and Pastor Terry was talking to this gentleman, and I kept looking. I'm thinking, I know that man. He looks so familiar. And he said, Rodney. And I was like, not Rodney Rosario. And he said, yeah. And I was like, Dr. Rosario? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, I know him. And I was telling Pastor Terry the story, and then he walks up and he knew who I was again. And he remembered the situation the very first time he met me. And so this is one of those moments that I feel like God let me know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be at this moment. And so I just wanted you to know, Dr. Rosario, that what you did from your heart in 2010 meant a lot to me. So thank you. So I'm not gonna get all mushy and start bawling, crying my eyes out because I'm a big crybaby. I'm gonna introduce the next speaker because I'm so excited. I met this brother many years ago, and he just started transitioning, and we used to meet down the waterfront, and then we lost touch, and then I found out that he has detransitioned and surrendered his life, and I was just blown away. And so I want everyone that's watching to know too that there'll be a link on my page tonight for his GoFundMe, because it's important that he raises enough money to take care of what he needs to take care of medically and physically for himself, because wrong sex hormones destroy you, mind, body, and soul. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Michael and let Michael come up.
I'll start out and say the reason we lost touch, Dave, was I hated you for speaking the truth. That time we met up, when you spoke the truth, I hated you. That's why we lost touch. I didn't want to hear it. I grew up in the church. I knew God. I actually carried a Bible all through high school. I was the only kid who did. And because of certain events in life, I walked away from God and walked as far away as I could. And that's why I actually brought a Bible today, so I could read Luke 15:3 through 7, which says, "And he spake this parable unto them, saying, What man of you having 100 sheep, if he lose one of them, doth not leave the 99 in the wilderness, and go after that which is lost, until he find it? And when he hath found it, he layeth it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he cometh home, he calleth together his friends and neighbors, saying unto them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep, which was lost. I say unto you, that likewise joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth, more than over 99 just persons, which need no repentance." I knew God, and I chose to be the sheep that ran away. And my adoptive mother sent a lot of people to try and turn me back, and they annoyed me, so I stopped talking to them. And unfortunately, sounds like we share a similar story. My birth father shot himself when I was 33 days old. My mother dated some nasty men who used to dress me up as a girl and take advantage of me when my mother said no. He did a lot of other horrible things too, and it led to me going into programs as a ward of the state. I had no family. I was awkward. I had no friends. I was the only kid in the programs who had no family visitors. I was always alone, so I was always seeking a way to have more attention, to be more important, and to do things the right way is hard. But when you go hang out with the wrong crowds and you let them convince you who you are and what you should do, that's easy. Because all you got to do is rebel, act up, be ridiculous and foolish, and they'll love you. That's basically what happened to me. I ran into somebody who was part of that community on I think it was a Greyhound bus. And I started expressing some of my history, and they took advantage of that to basically convince me that I must be trans. And I was like, hey, maybe that's my problem. Maybe that's why I'm always anxious. Maybe that's why I'm afraid. Maybe that's why I'm angry. It wasn't, but I fell for it. Then I found out I had a child that I had been informed by some people was supposedly miscarried, and I started misleading my child into calling me mom and couldn't find a way out of it. The state actually pushed me not to detransition when I found out I had a kid I wanted to. The DHS workers didn't want me to have my kid if I detransitioned. They felt like it would mean I was too unstable. So I felt trapped. And in feeling trapped, I ran as far away from God as I could. I raised my son to be an atheist. I created a YouTube channel for the pro-LGBT movement, anti-God, anti-everything. The last 4 or 5 years, I realized I wasn't actually happy. I was masking the depression by pretending to be happy. I thought about taking my own life numerous times. Thinking about my son down the hall is the only reason I'm still standing. I couldn't do what my father did to my own kid. I grew up believing that being a man was too hard, and that it meant you're supposed to suffer. You're supposed to never cry. You're supposed to shake off all the pain. You're supposed to never show any weakness. I just wanted to be weak. I just wanted to be allowed to show fear, sadness, not always just pretend that I was strong, and I fell. Now I've started a new YouTube channel for God. I'm trying to bring my son around. He's started to accept that there might be a God, but he's not quite there yet. I'm marrying his mother. He's sitting right there. We're going to be an actual family, something I never had. I'm trying to find my way into the right path, creating Christian music, trying to spread the word wherever I go, trying to get people to realize that community is not a community. It's a trap. It's a place for you to go and just pretend you're complete. There's nothing there. Everybody I met in that community over the years seemed angry, hurt, depressed, miserable, reactive. And it's been about 4 years that I've actually been trying to find my way out of that trap. And I couldn't seem to find a way. Because I ended up in a relationship with someone who was also living like that. And when I started talking about not wanting to continue down that path, they would threaten to leave. My fear, my flesh, my refusal to accept God, I was like, well, I can't risk that. Finally, one night, about 4 or 5 months ago, or was it 3 months? I don't know. She'd know better than me. I decided to try out God one more time. And I said, God, I need this relationship done. But I also want the promise that I felt like you gave me all those years ago that my son's mother and I would be together. So that's what I did. I prayed. 2 nights later, the person I was with walked out for no apparent reason. When I called my son's mother, she was willing to come down for a few days. And I expressed to her what I wanted to do, that I wanted to turn back to God. I wanted to detransition. I wanted us to be a family. It took all of 24 hours, maybe 48 hours for us to start making wedding plans. It Turns out both of us had been in love with each other, and because of the way I was living, we were too afraid to admit it. If people out there are living this way right now, and you're going through this, and you're feeling like you can't leave because, as Dave mentioned, when you leave, the community is more toxic than when you're in it. Not that it's not toxic when you're in it. Suddenly they hate you. You're not accepted. There's no diversity allowed. There's no Christian straight people out there. That's not okay. They'll threaten you. They'll come for you. They'll treat you like garbage. But there are communities that will embrace you. And there's a God that will embrace you and forgive you for the path you walked on. There's only one person you're supposed to put above everyone else, and that's Jesus. When you walk away, he sure lets you know that you're on the wrong path because you stumble and fall repeatedly while he tries to pull you back. He tries to come find you. You are that lost sheep. When you don't let him take you back, watch out. Things become very miserable, empty and hollow. I can't believe how easy it is. For me, like I said, I carried a Bible in a little Bible holster all through high school. I preached. I was studying to be a pastor. All it took was I started drinking with a friend. Then I started drinking heavily. Then I started not caring that I was drinking and driving, which meant I wasn't caring about the lives of others. Little by little, I stopped caring about my own life, which led to me not caring about God. I tried to turn back to God for a little while, and I felt filled. But I was so worried with what other people thought of me, how other people would feel, how I looked to other people, that I then trapped myself back into the drinking, the violent music, the tough guy attitude. Then I got sick of the tough guy attitude, and then I allowed myself to fall into the very next trap that I stayed in for 12 years. I have failed my son in so many ways because of that life. And I realized the anxiety I had every day was worse than the anxiety I ever had. I didn't want to go to playgrounds with my son. I went, but I was reluctant because I didn't want to be seen that way because I knew it was weird. It was wrong. I've never been able to teach him to swim because, unlike a lot of that community, I didn't want to put on a bathing suit and go be seen like that. That's actually the donation that Dave is talking about, is to help me remove what has happened to my chest from the hormones so I can finally teach my son to swim. I was a good swimmer. I haven't swam in 13 years. It didn't matter how hot it was. I'd take him to the lake and let him dip himself in while I stood on shore in a long sleeve shirt and jeans. That life is nothing but trauma. And I can tell you, when people came at me trying to browbeat me with the Bible, it never helped. You can't beat the Bible into somebody. It drove me further away from God because I felt hated by these people. I was like, why are the Christians? And I'm like, I used to be one. I know how it's supposed to be when you're walking with God. But why are they hating me? Why are they holding up signs like glorifying that I'm going to hell? Well, if they're going to glorify it, so am I. Love and compassion will do more to help get people out of this community than anything else. Showing them that they don't have to be afraid to leave, that they're going to have a new support system that's healthier and better, one that isn't just trying to get their clothes off. Because that is what I saw more than anything. When I lived as a trans woman, I dated 3 trans people. Each one of them did not want monogamy. They didn't want to be in a relationship with just you and them. They wanted to bring other people in. They wanted to go to parties that I wasn't willing to go to because I still held on to a certain level of my Christian morality throughout it all. Don't know how I pulled it off, but they would all try and they'd leave because I didn't want to do those things. And everyone I spoke to, as Dave said, was traumatized by the loss of a parent, generally a father, or was beaten brutally by their father. They were mistreated as a child. They generally saw their sisters being treated better. It's an early age trauma. I remember one time when I think I was 5 years old, my mother's boyfriend, my birth mother, not my adopted mother. My adopted mother's great, but my birth mother's boyfriend was coming up the steps, drunk as always, whipping his belt on every step, laughing like a maniac. My birth mother threw my sisters behind her back on the bed. When I tried to crawl behind for protection, she threw me towards him and said, "Go be a man and take care of him." I was 5. I did not meet one trans person who didn't share similar traumas, who wasn't basically tortured by male role models and abandoned by mothers. You can't reach them. You can't pull them out. You can't bring them back to Jesus or to Jesus for the first time. If you're coming at them with hate, screaming at them that they're going to hell, what does that mean to somebody who's not saved? You're going to hell. It means nothing. You can't do it. You can't save them by throwing a scripture verse or a threat. You need to sit down, talk to them, learn their story, get to know where they're coming from, and show them that A, you're not going to try to sleep with them like everyone else is, and B, you're not going to judge them like everyone else is, and C, that you actually care about them like nobody has. They're not freaks. They're lost souls. And every lost soul can be saved. And isn't it the responsibility of everybody who claims to walk with Christ to try to bring people in? But you drive them away when you come with your picket signs and you're screaming at them and you're hate mongering. You can't bring them in. That's why they're that way anyway. They've been hated. They've been screamed at. They've been beaten. So they were beaten into it, and people think they're going to beat them out of it? No. The Bible tells us that we are supposed to spread the love of Christ. You can't spread love with hate and anger. And vengeance is God's, not ours. So if your problem with people is that they're sinners, that sin's not being committed against you. It's being committed against God. So why should you go after revenge? Why should you go after some antagonistic response? The job we have as Christians is to show them the love of Christ, but also not to force anything on them, because you don't cast pearls before swine. You don't plant your seeds on the rocks. You plant the seeds in fertile soil. Sometimes you have to till the soil first. That's the part where you're approaching these people who are so lost, so confused, and so scared, and you're letting them know that you're there for them when they're ready. You are not there to try and grab them, twist their arm, and drag them. I'm sure most of them have already had it done. And that's why they are the way they are. They're confused, they're scared, they're lonely, they want to feel filled. And that community promises to do this. When I first went into this, I sat down to talk to a doctor, and I asked them about this. They didn't ask me to see a therapist. They didn't ask me to see a psychiatrist. They didn't ask me hardly anything. The one question I got asked, did you ever think this way once before? I said, yeah, when I was 5. They didn't ask why. I didn't explain that my mother's boyfriend would literally put me in girls' clothes, call me a girl. She didn't ask. Then she gave me a form to sign, and on that form it gave me like 5 health conditions that I might get from doing this. I had to promise I understood those 5 health conditions. Needless to say, it left out about 40 more that I've dealt with over the years. They're deceiving people into this. From the medical community down. These people are victims of the flesh, of fear, and of the medical community. If you can't show them love, you can't show them compassion, you can't give a little patience, then you can't say that you're acting like Christ when you're dealing with them. When the Pharisees came at Jesus and they tried to test him, and they asked him what the most important commandment was, and he said, love your God, no other God before him. He didn't then start screaming at them and berating them because they were doing something that was upsetting him or that he knew was manipulative and wrong. He just answered the question. So they tried again. He didn't scream at them that they needed to be quiet, go away, leave them alone. He answered the question. You know, the one thing I found while I was living as a trans person, when I would approach the people who were Christians, as myself, someone who knew the Bible very well, a lot of Christians hated actually answering a question. They wanted to tell me something. They didn't care what I had to ask. A lot of times when I was asking them a question, it's because I wanted them to answer it right and give me an excuse to leave that life. But I couldn't get answers. I was talked at. I was talked at like I never read a Bible in my life. I used to read it cover to cover 3 times a year. Salvation will not come to the trans community through brute force. It will not come through a legal system. It will not come through any of it. It will come from being actual Christians who actually follow Jesus, follow his teaching, and follow his word. When Jesus approached people, he didn't come at them with whips unless they were the ones in the temple misusing it. Everyone else, he basically came with love, compassion. Even when he came to the demon-possessed man that he cast the demons into the swine, he didn't come with viciousness for the man. He came with viciousness for the demons inside. You cannot save the flesh by attacking the flesh. You can only try to save the spirit. And you're going to do that with kindness, understanding that the majority of that community is suffering. No matter how much they pretend they're not, they know they are. They go out and they party and they laugh and they smile all night long. They go home and cry at night. They cry before they go to sleep. Approach them with kindness. You'll get a lot further. But when they tell you to leave them alone, leave them alone. You don't cast pearls before swine. You've already planted the seed. A seed that's the size of a mustard seed is all you need. When they see that you're not going to browbeat them, you're not going to bully them, you're not going to condemn them, you're not going to scream at them, you're not going to hate them, you just planted that mustard seed. There's no reason to try to plant the whole tree when you can start small, because they might come to you later. That's how I tested my soon-to-be wife when I first started talking about detransition. She never came at me and bullied me. She didn't browbeat me. When I said, well, what if I wanted to, go back to some kind of God, but I don't know which God? She goes, well, good, that's the first step. Do you know how many times over the last 13 years I would have just had someone scream at me, it's do it this way or nothing? In a matter of 25 minutes, I went from that to I need to detransition, I need to serve God, I need to spread the word. Because she handled the mustard seed she had been already planting repeatedly in such a healthy and productive way that I couldn't resist. I remembered the calling I had 15, 20 years ago. Wow, time goes by quick. I'm on track for that calling because the Holy Spirit would not let go, and it used my soon-to-be wife as the vessel. because she's nonstop come at me with kindness, compassion. And when I would try to fight with her and try to convince her that the Bible wasn't real, she didn't fight back. Kind of annoyed me. I wanted to argue. I wanted to be vindicated in my hatred. But she would go silent and say, if that's how you feel and that's what you think, I think differently. That's simple. It's easy to get in our flesh. But there's really no difference between the sin of being in your flesh and living as a trans or a gay person, and living in your flesh by being hostile and vindictive and driving people away from Christ. You're not going to pull them in with your muscles. You're not going to pull them in with a whole bunch of just spewed out words. And you certainly can't just flip this open and read a verse to someone who's never heard the Bible before or hasn't heard it in 20 years, and suddenly they're going to bow down and be saved. But when you show them that something in you, the joy in you, is something they should seek. It even tells us that in here. People will come to you because they will see the joy. It's pretty clear. If you're coming at them with anger and hostility, how are you showing any joy? You seem just as angry and hostile and demeaning as the trans community. You can't fight the fire of hell with the fire of hell. You fight it with the light of God. Shine a light for these people, and you'll get a lot more productivity than you're getting when you try to just sit there and see how quick you can anger them. The pain and misery that most people who've gone through this have experienced, not only while being trans, but before, is something most of you should just feel lucky you've never lived through.
I love you. You know, I remember I used to represent nightclubs and businesses when I was in Philadelphia and Jersey and New York. And I used to represent them on their floats during their Pride Parade. And I remember being on the float one day in one of the parades. And I remember going by this corner, and these people were out there with these signs and their Bibles and bullhorns. And the sign said, God hates fags. And like, I just remember like looking at them from the float thinking, I don't want to know that God. Right. And then we get to the end of the parade, and this church that was in the parade with us, that was partaking of our delusions, was going around to everybody, and they came to me and they said, don't you worry about them hateful people. God made you just the way you are. And I remember thinking in my head as they walked away, like, you mean he made me confused? He put me in the wrong body? He made me feel like this? Yeah, I don't want to know that God either. But I never took it past that. I never took it further. I never looked. Like, if we look at people, I've had, and I'm not patting me on the back. David isn't special. I'm not special. I'm just obedient. And I have seen men and women come out of those delusions and out of that confusion and out of that false identity just by having a relationship with them, being the word, the deed, the action. They don't have to, like, one thing I wanted people to understand about me was homosexuality and all of that other stuff. That wasn't the only sin I was guilty of. You don't, like, they didn't have to come beat me in the head about that specific thing. And it's so important that we understand that the only way we can truly pour into somebody is if we establish an intimate bond with them. And I know that in today's world, intimacy has been blurred. A lot of people think intimacy is sexual, and it has nothing to do. The two are totally separate. Intimacy is what David and Jonathan shared. It's what Jesus and his disciples shared. It's what the Father and the Son shared. That's intimacy. And I have had intimate relationships with some men that have come to me and said, you know, I've just learned that I can have a relationship with a man that doesn't have to be sexual. The relationship that we have has filled a void within me. That's what the Christ does. We introduce them to him with our words, our deeds, our actions, just by being the light. That's it. We don't have to be, they know where I stand. I have friends right now. They are trans identified. I have friends right now. They claim the identity of homosexual. They know where I stand, but I'm who they call when they want a prayer, when they're going through something, when they need something. I'm who they call because they know I'm there for them. And I have seen, and that is exactly the path that I have seen so many men and women come out of it. And so it's really important that we think about that we think about how we minister and how we pour into people. Because going out there and just telling them that they're wrong, that they're delusional, that they have a mental disorder, it doesn't matter. Some of it may be true, but that's not the truth they need. They need the truth. Jesus the Christ is the truth. That's who they need. And they need to be introduced to him. So I kind of want to thank everybody for coming and give people some time that are here to maybe mingle and talk. And maybe if you have any questions for Michael, maybe talk with them, get to know him. His mother and father are, they've been in my life for many years, and they love the Lord. And there's no doubt about that. And, unlike Michael, I didn't have anyone praying for me. I didn't have that praying grandma, that praying mother, that praying father. I didn't have that. When I came to know him, it was just me and him. That was it. There was no congregation coming and laying on hands. There was none of that. It was just me and him. And he let me know that I had a father that loved me unconditionally. And so that's what's the most important for me, is that we have relationships with people and we just pour into them and be the word, be the deed, and be the action. And so I have some books on my table for donation. Please take any of the materials over there. They work amazingly. I tell you, ask an ex-trans anything. I've done ministry for years, and I always have confrontation when I'm out. This is the least confrontational ministry I've done, believe it or not, because of what it says. Ask an ex-trans anything. So there's no confrontation because they know it's ex-trans. Usually when I tell people about me, I'm telling them about them. So I don't have to ask them about them. I'm telling them all about them just by telling them about me. This causes people who are allies, loved ones, to come up to me and say, I have a question. Can I ask you a question about this? How do I go about this? What am I supposed to do with this? This is the most powerful ministry I've done in 16 years. The most powerful ministry. And it's simple as wearing a t-shirt into Target or into Sam's Club, walking around, going for a walk. And people look and say, thank you, or I like your shirt, or can I talk with you? Can I ask you anything? Even people who disagree, they're not confrontational. They say, okay, well, I have a question for you. And they ask me a question and I give them my answer. Personal life knowledge and experience. It works. But always remember, you don't have to have been trans or homosexual or a drug addict or an alcoholic to reach those individuals. Because the man that poured into me was a correctional officer that came from FEMA to corrections. He never was trans. He was never homosexual, nothing. But he knew that he had to be the word, the deed, the action. He had to pour into me. He knew I needed a relationship. He knew he had to feed the natural man with what the natural man desires the most, and that's a relationship. So I'm going to end it tonight, and we will not be streaming live tomorrow. So if you are interested, if you are within distance, you can come tomorrow. I will be recording, and I will put that recording online after I edit it. But I want to thank everybody online as well. And I want to thank everybody. I definitely want to thank Michael and his soon to be beautiful wife, Nicolette, and his son. I saw his son when he was like a year and a half, maybe two. And now he's like all grown up. So I think it blesses my heart. It really does. It really blesses my heart. So thank you, everybody. Please feel free to eat, to drink, and be merry.